Oh man. Geez. I have always kind of suspected that I had autism, but this really was a much needed reality check for me, a wake up call, because it's starting to affect my life in really negative ways, and I just need to start taking it more seriously, I think, because the fact that I was just completely oblivious to, I guess, the reality of this whole situation the entire time. So where do I even start? If you know me at all, you know that I'm an animal lover, right? I love animals, and it wasn't always that way, I will admit. I grew up in a household, we didn't have pets when I was a kid. So I didn't really grow up with that kind of situation going on. It wasn't really until I started to get older and I started going to college and I started having roommates and things that I had pets around. And the idea of there being an animal in your house was very foreign to me, and it was very strange. And I'll never forget, the first roommate that I had who had a cat, he went on vacation, and he was like, can you watch Dingo? I don't remember what her name was, but while I'm gone, can you feed Dingo and maybe play with her and sit with her and spend time with her? So I was like, sure, And I'll never forget that first night that I went into his room with Dingo. That wasn't her name, but I just don't remember what her name was. Ding Dong. Went into the room with Ding Dong and sat down, and it was such a nice memory for me. That's why I'm, getting a little choked up, because I had never experienced anything like that before. I had never experienced any kind of feeling of connection that was quite like that, because it's totally different from a connection that you might have with a human being. I didn't really know what the emotion was at first, because I sat down next to Dingo, and at first she was sort of distrustful of me, but then eventually she sort of came over and was like kind of nuzzling me and laid down, and I was scratching her and, petting her and things. And it was just like, what am I feeling right now? This is so strange. And thinking back on it, I guess that really was the first time that I ever felt like love for an animal. Obviously I liked animals and they were cool, but one that felt like I was really seen by an animal. This idea that an animal really had a connection with me. And from that point on, I started to it was great. The roommate situation is great if you sort of want a pet, but you don't really want the responsibility. Having a roommate that has a pet is great, because you can just sort of, it's kind of like being childless, but having a friend who has a kid, or having a sibling who has a kid, because then you could just see the kid whenever you want to feel like you have a kid, but then go away whenever you actually have to do anything too responsible, You just get the good parts. So that was kind of the way that it was, and I was very satisfied with that for a long time, and then I would date people who had pets, and live with people who had pets, and so on and so forth over the years, and all of them were a little bit different. And basically what ended up happening was I sort of got into a living situation with somebody who didn't have a pet for the first time in years, and so the void, I started to feel the void in my life, in my day-to-day life, and I was so, I'll admit, I always kind of looked down on people who would get a pet and say it like, oh, well, this pet is my reason to be alive or whatever. And it's like, well, sounds like you're just weak. that you need to rely on an animal to get you through the day. But then I sort of started to understand, because it's like, well, especially like, I don't know, sometimes you just want something to love you. You know, that's really all it is. And that feels nice. Something who can love you and who you can love, but does not come with all the complications that connecting with another human being does. You know, in a way, and I don't know if I necessarily believe the idea that like the love that you share with an animal is more pure than that with a human being, but certainly, you know, with a human being, you can you convince yourself there's 101 different reasons why the person loves you that aren't because you are you, you know? And with an animal, there's only really one. You know, you give them food. But I can handle that. You know, even at my most anxious, even at my most attachment anxious style, you know, I can say like, well, this animal only loves me because I give it food. And it's like, well, I mean, you know, okay, here's some food. That's a fair deal. And it makes me feel good. You know, it makes me feel good that like I am caring for something. So anyway, long story short, basically, I like animals. And I had sort of decided that I was going to try to, I wanted to get a cat. But I was not going, I was like, well, it kind of snuck up on me too. Cause I was like, oh, I don't want to, you know, I don't, that's a lot of responsibility for me. And that'll be a lot right now. And I don't know if it would be a good decision for me to seek that out, you know. But what I sort of said was, if a situation comes along that is perfect, then if it feels like it's sort of meant to be, then I'm not gonna, I'll follow that if it happens. That's sort of the way that I live my life, is like, well, I'm not going to try to force this into reality, but if it materializes, I'm not going to say no, you know? So I sort of left it that I was like, I'll keep my eyes and ears open. And if a situation comes along that seems like it would be perfect, then I'll follow that lead. And I've heard people say that too. It's like when you get an animal, they sort of find you as much as you find them. You know, and periodically I would go to the website of the shelter, or the Humane Society, and I'd scroll through and see who they got on deck. And it's a strange thing, you know, because it's like, oh yeah, they're all very cute and precious. But when you see the one who's like the one, you feel it instantly, and it's a feeling that you don't feel with any other, you know, even if you're just looking at like a lineup of photos. You can feel that. It's sort of like a, you know, in your gut. And you just know. So I was waiting for that feeling, you know. So, you know, you see on social media and things all the time posts that are about like people who find animals on the street, or maybe somebody knows somebody who has an animal or a cat and needs help, and it's like, you know, I mean, most of the time when you're not thinking about it, you kind of just gloss over those. When people post on Instagram or Reddit or something, or the Instagram stories, and they're like, hey, you know, this kitten needs help, or found this kitty by the dumpster, or like, you know, neglected and abused kitten, you know, something like that. So sometimes those just come up. And so if I would see something like that, I would try to follow the lead, like I said, and I would reach out and respond, and I say, hey, you know, I'm considering getting a cat. I'm not sure, but I'd love some more information. You know, because it's sort of a similar thing with like jobs, applying for jobs. I mean, it's not nearly as difficult as that, or getting a date. You know, you have to look at it all kind of the same way. It's like, all of these really are auditions, and you might put out 10, you might follow 10 leads, and one of them, you get 9 no. This was what I always was told about all this stuff, especially like jobs. You apply for 100 jobs, you get 99 no answers and 1 no. It's the same thing with really anything along those lines. Like, you just kind of have to, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I do really believe that, so I would pretty much follow any of these leads that would come about. Something that I'll also say about me that I've noticed, just about me personally, that really isn't specific to this animal situation, but it comes about in all aspects of my life. I am not very persistent, because I am afraid that if I am too persistent, I will always wonder if the other person is just going along with it because I'm being persistent, and they're too afraid to say no, basically. So that's why I never really want to be too forward. I never really want to be too aggressive when pursuing anything, when pursuing it, I don't know, the romantic opportunity or job opportunity or anything like that, really, so that's why I tend to, I tend to like people who are more persistent with me, because then that way I know my mind can't play tricks on itself and say like, oh, well, this person wouldn't be talking to you if you weren't annoying them or something. Or just like, I can tell myself, obviously, this person wants this to happen because otherwise they're the ones initiating most of it, So when I get all anxious into my head, I can fall back on that and be like, well, I mean, if it versus like, if I'm the one making all the initiations, then you wonder, like, if you just stopped one day, would the other person bother to answer at all, and that would be very crushing for me if that was the case. So a lot of times what would happen is I would reach out to these people and, be like, hey, I'd love some more information, and they'd be like, oh yeah, sure, or they wouldn't even answer the first time, it would just peter out after that, and I wouldn't really. Because I have ADHD, which I've wondered if that was autism, but I never knew to begin with, because there's a lot of overlap in the symptoms. So anyway, my point with all this is that I would reach out, and a lot of times it would go nowhere. And so I don't even really remember how this started. I mean, you sort of lose track of this stuff, but it must have been like an Instagram post or a Reddit post or something that said, just one of those things that was like, my kitty is neglected and abused or something like that. Like I need somebody to take care of my kitten, or my I don't remember exactly what the verbiage was, and again, because I was just kind of like just follow the lead. So I sort of was like, oh, somebody's got a cat who needs some help. Sure. And I just sent along. That's the thing. I don't even remember what the message was that I said. I don't really remember anything that I said particularly, because I just wasn't thinking about it that hard. I was just kind of like going, you're just following the leads, just to see if they lead anywhere. That's why they're called leads, because they might lead somewhere, So, the reason why I'm prefacing all of this is because this person was very persistent with me, and so I was going along with it because they were being really persistent. So they answered right away, and they would, anytime I would send a question or something like that, and I would say like, hey, I'm interested, I'm in this city and are you nearby? Like I could come over, something like that. And right away, basically, as soon as I would send a message like that, the person would be like, yes, come over whenever you want. When can you come over? Like, can you come over tomorrow? And I was like, well, hang on a minute. I don't even know that. I haven't even seen this kitty? You know, I haven't even seen your kitty. You know, can we just hang on a minute? And it was, I mean, you know, because here's the other thing, you know, I know that there have been a lot of situations where an animal is a big responsibility. And I remember one time with an ex of mine, we fostered a cat, and there was an incident where, you know, we kind of were like, well, we can't really have this because she had a pit bull. So we were able to do it because it was an emergency situation, and we were able to just keep the cat in another room with door closed. But we were like, this is not a long-term solution. We need, this cat's very high maintenance, and we need to get this cat out of here as quickly as possible because it's not working. So, you know, I don't even remember what happened, but basically we just pretty much went with the first person who said yes. Person came over, and then they were total serial killer, and they were like, all right, see you later. Took the cat. We were like, oh my God, this cat's dead. You know, and that haunts me specifically. That haunts both of us, you know, ever since. And so I totally understand that when you are thinking about giving an animal away, that's a very big decision. It's a big responsibility because you want to vet the person very carefully, and you want to make sure that this person who you're giving this animal to, entrusting this animal's life and care with, is somebody who is going to be responsible and is somebody who also is going to give them the same love and care and attention that you would give them, but you can't, you know. So I totally understood, you know, why the person was asking me all these questions, like, you know, how old are you? You know, what are your, just trying to get to know me in general, like, what are your hobbies? What do you like to do? You know, and I like movies, so we started kind of bonding over some movies and, you know, things like that. And I was just like, well, this person seems kind of cool. I mean, this is great. Like, because part of it is also a compatibility test. Everything really is a compatibility in the same way. It's like, I keep bringing up all these other things like jobs and romantic partners and pets and things, but really it's all the likability, being likable and getting along well with somebody. That is really the key to any opportunity in life at all. You know, that really is the key. And it's something that I am, you know, because I was always kind of concerned that I might have autism, I would try to my best to put on a good show, you know, and try my best to seem really charismatic and likable. And I, you know, would watch YouTube videos and things on how to be likable. And it's basically just like ask the person a lot of questions about themselves, you know, say their own name a lot, you know, all these things that make the person feel valued and wanted. And so I tried to do that with everybody, you know, and there's a great book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which outlines all of this stuff. And it's really good. If you haven't read it, especially if you're autistic, you should read it. And so, you know, I was just trying to be affable. I was trying to be friendly, and I was trying to, you know, kind of seem like a nice guy and seem like somebody who was interested in the other person. And I guess my problem is that I don't really know, like some people, I don't really know how to modulate that. So maybe sometimes I go overboard. I mean, I don't know. That's the thing. Like I try never to do anything that's going to make anybody uncomfortable or put anybody in a weird situation. But also I'm just trying to be likable. I'm trying to get people to like me, you know, and that's just, you know, there's nothing like the white hot horror of realizing in a single moment that you have completely misread a situation to a disastrous degree, and you can see it in the other person's face, and you're all of a sudden hit with that like a ton of bricks, and then you're like, oh my God, like I am so sorry, I had no idea that this was the way that the situation was. It's like all of a sudden you're questioning your entire reality. You're questioning everything up until this point because genuinely you had no idea that that's what the situation was actually playing out as, you know. And that kind of stuff makes you doubt yourself a lot because you take for, you know, you kind of take for granted the fact that like you're in touch with reality, you know what a situation is, you know actually what's happening, and you know kind of you're reading things appropriately. And then if all of a sudden you're not, it totally pulls the rug out from under you, because all these things that you were sort of just going along with that were, you know, feeling effortless, you're like, oh yeah, I'm just being the way that a human being is. This is just how people talk to each other. This is just how people interact with each other. And this is just what happens when people talk to each other. You know, I remember once I was at a bar, and I don't go out very often, you know, hardly ever. This was just the one because I had just been in a really bad breakup. And so I was like, I need to get out of the house and do something because I have nothing, and I need to, you know, with depression and things like that, it's always like you just have to take your medicine. You just have to interact with people. You just got to force yourself to do it like you're swallowing medicine. Even if it doesn't taste good, it'll make you feel better. It'll always make you feel better. You just have to force yourself to do it, because your brain plays tricks on you and says, no, you don't have enough energy to talk to people. You don't want to talk to people. That's going to make you feel worse. You know, then it's not going to help, and you don't even want to do it. But it's like, no, you have to force yourself to swallow the medicine. Doesn't matter who it is. You just have to talk to somebody, and you have to connect with somebody, and it'll make you feel better. It will. Always it does. But your brain is playing tricks on you, and it doesn't want you to think that. So I was like, I'm just going to go to a bar by myself, and I'm just going to try to talk to somebody. I'm just going to try to talk to anybody, you know. So I remember there was this girl who, you know, I mean, and again, maybe I don't know. Like, I don't know if for how long I was misreading the situation. Like, because I was pretty sure when it started out that it was all friendly, you know, because the girl was sort of laughing, joking around. And I was like, yeah, you know, I was telling her all about this breakup, and you know, I could have sworn that at one point she even said, why don't you come sit down with our friends, you know, or something like that. I don't know, you know, but it really felt like it was going well. And I don't know, when I think back on it, I don't know at what point it shifted, or if it had always been this way and I was just misreading it the entire time, or if at a certain point in the conversation it did shift. I couldn't tell. I had no barometer for that at all. All I know is that it caught me totally off guard when all of a sudden she said, if you don't leave me alone, then I'm going to call the cops. And I was like, huh? What? And then that was like, wait a minute. Or is that a joke? Like, are you joking? She was like, I'm dead serious. Please leave me alone. And I was like, when the hell did that happen? I thought we were just having a nice conversation. I thought this was going well. You know, I thought we were enjoying each other's company. And I didn't even know what to think. I was like, okay, you know, okay. I just sort of obviously I left, you know, and I went home and I was like, you know, it was just so different from what I thought the situation was. And I was like, at what point did this happen? You know, at what point did it turn into this? You know, was it something that I said, or was it something that had been that way the entire time? You know, so that's just, and that kind of stuff that's a very dramatic example, but that kind of stuff would happen to me all the time, you know, and so, I just don't know. I just don't know how, I don't know, you know, and it seems like I'm just missing something. I'm missing like a gauge. I'm missing a instrument that allows me to read this particular measurement of things that everybody else has, you know, and that's what allows them to function in life. And that's what allows them to have successful social lives and successful professional lives and things that I don't have that, you know, so I can't function in a social world. I can't function in a social society because I'm missing that part of me. And I only know how to read a situation when it's too late, you know? And it's just, you know. And it's the type of thing that it's like, what are they going to do? Like, I'll be like, well, should I go to a psychiatrist? Should I go to a therapist? And they'll be like, what are they going to do? You know, it's not like there's some magic pill that's going to fix everything in your life, you know? It's not like there's some magic pill that's going to all of a sudden make it so that you fundamentally are a human being. You know, if there's such a large portion of you missing compared to everybody else, it's like you're not just going to get that overnight just from going to the doctor, you know. So anyway, I always let my guard down. That's the thing. It's always fine if I am vigilant. And if I am being careful, then it's fine. These things only start to go bad when I let my guard down and I make the mistake of trying to think that I can just go with my gut and I can just let loose. You know, as soon as I'm like, oh, it's fine, I'm better, I'm good, I can just let it go, I can just go with the flow, man. That's always how I end up in a situation like this. Always. And so that's why I have learned, just never let your guard down. You got to be safe for the sake of everybody else around you, certainly for the sake of yourself, but clearly for the sake of everybody else around you. You know. I just let my guard down this time. So we were talking for a while, and then finally, you know, we set up a day that I was going to come over and I was going to, you know, meet the cat and just see if it was a good fit, you know, which is the type of thing, again, like it's like that's to be expected in this situation. So, you know, what I was happy about, because obviously I'm nervous and obviously I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to do the wrong thing. But also at the same time, like what sort of led me to me putting my guard down was the fact that all of our conversation at this point had been so smooth, you know, and so effortless, and it felt so right, you know, even though we were just talking about a cat, it was like, you know, it was like, this was one of the first times in my life. This was one of the first people in my life who, when I would speak to, I wouldn't feel, you know, I didn't feel like I was doing something wrong. And I didn't feel like I had to, you know, type out the message and then reread what I had typed out over and over again to look at it from every possible angle and make sure that it was right, you know. You know, and she said, "Can I call you on the phone, you know, before you come over?" And I was like, I mean, I guess so. If you want to make sure that I'm not like a serial killer or something, I guess that's fine. You know. Again, you know, she was very nice on the phone. She's very sweet, very, very accommodating. You know, somebody who it felt like was making sure at every possible juncture, every possible thing to assure me that nothing was wrong, you know, to assure me that I was safe in this situation, you know, going above and beyond to put me at ease and say, no, you know, everything is fine. Even if they weren't coming out and saying it, you know, like, everything is fine. Just come, you know, just come over. You can, you know, we'll talk a little bit and we'll see if it's right. And then go from there. You know, so I was like, great. You know, so I came over and I walk in the front door, you know, and I was not like, I came in, walk in, and she's like, "Hey, you know, how you doing? Nice to finally meet you." So I was like, "Yeah, nice to meet you too." You know. She said, "Why don't you come in? I'm just gonna, you know, do my hair or something. I don't know. I'm doing something over here. But I made some cookies. If you want to have some cookies." Yeah. So I didn't want to be rude, so of course I ate one of the cookies, and they were very bad, to be honest. They were rock solid. It tasted like they had been sitting out on the counter for about 3 days. And I said that. I said, hey, I'm sorry, but these cookies are very, very not good. You shouldn't be offering these cookies to people because they're inedible. And that's the type of thing that I feel like is helpful to say. And then I later realized comes across as rude. But it's like, when am I supposed to pretend that the cookie is good? Just for what reason? Why? The cookies are not good. Shouldn't I tell you that? No. So I was just sitting there waiting, and I did start to get a little bit of a strange feeling at this point, because I did not see any evidence that there was a cat in the house. Normally when you go into a house, like, no offense to people who have cats, but you can kind of smell, there's cat smell, and there's toys maybe, or there's some evidence that the house has been lived in at all. This house felt like I had walked into a real estate open house, like a showing, or an IKEA showroom. It was like everything had been very intentionally placed, and like even the stuff that seemed lived in was like somebody had just tossed a pair of jeans on a chair, or something of that nature. But still, I again, that's the whole thing that fucking sucks, is that I don't know. People are like, well, just go with your gut, listen to your gut. And I'm like, my gut is wrong most of the time. I don't know, I have no idea when something's weird and when something is just the way that something is. It all feels the same to me. So, so then this man walks in very confidently. So I assumed it was like her dad or something. I don't know. And he said, "Hey there, how's it going?" And I said, "Oh, hello." He kind of scared me because he kind of came out of nowhere, and he was like, seemed like he was trying to surprise me. But I thought maybe he was just like, sometimes dads are goofy. They do silly things. So he kind of came out and said, "Why don't you have a seat right over there?" So I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I instantly realized, just from talking to this guy, this is the type of guy that I'm so jealous of, because I just instantly realized that he just had it all figured out. The way that he speaks to you, again, it's that thing of like, you just feel so at ease. The way that he speaks to you, it's like he's confident. He's confident in what he's saying and what he's doing. And he's going to walk you through the situation, because I don't know. And it's just the type of person I'm so jealous of, because it's like this magic thing that I don't have. The fact that he can instantly just confidently walk into a room, change the whole dynamic of the room, and say, "I'm in charge now. I'm going to take care of the situation. Let's talk." You just feel the whole energy in the room shift towards him, and it all starts to go into him like a black hole, in a good way, So he was like, "So why'd you come here tonight?" And I was like, "Well, we were just gonna see if it was a good fit, we were just gonna see if it made sense. We weren't really gonna, it was nothing for sure. We were just gonna sort of see how it went and then go from there, And he was like, and how are you planning to do that? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. And I genuinely didn't know. Like, he's asking me questions I don't know the answer to, you know. And again, I was feeling uneasy about the situation. I was like, this feels like this is not the type of situation where you are adopting a cat. But again, I don't know. I'm just like, maybe this is just what happens when you go over someone's house to adopt a cat and they see if you're the right fit for the cat. Maybe this is just like the boyfriend or the dad who's trying to interview me and vet me and make sure that I'm who I say I am before they entrust me with this animal. I don't know. So he's holding a stack of papers. And he starts saying, so how long have you been talking with, what's her fuck? I don't remember what her name was. That's the thing. That's the whole other thing. It's like, I don't even remember what this person's name is. And I said, it hasn't been very long. It's been like a couple weeks, And he said, it seems like you two have sort of gotten to know each other pretty well. And I was like, I guess so. I mean, and he said, so he starts shuffling through the papers. And he starts reading them things out loud. So he's looking at the papers and he goes, can I see your kitty? And then he'll shuffle the paper. I don't care how old you are. Just show me your kitty. Shuffles the papers again. You can feel safe with me. I want to see your kitty. And that's when I realized he's reading the messages that we sent. And still, even at this point, I kind of naively was like, not really fully understanding what was going on. I was like, yes, I said all those things, but did I say something wrong? And that's what I asked him. I was like, did I do something wrong? And he was like, I'll be honest with you, yes, you did. And again, he just speaks so authoritatively and so confidently. I was like, can you please tell me what I've done wrong? Can you please tell me what I did wrong and help me how to fix it? Because I don't know how I always end up in these situations, and I don't do it on purpose. And he just had this way of speaking that he was like, I'm going to take care of you. Just tell me everything. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. And he said that he was like, he said, why are you getting so upset? And I didn't know that I was getting upset, but I guess I was upset. And I was like, do I seem upset? And he was like, yes, you're crying. And I was like, I'm sorry. I just don't know how to, I just feel like I just don't know what's going on. And he was like, well, calm down. And I was like, all right. He seemed like God, almost. And I trusted him as much. And he said, he asked me again, so why are you here tonight? And at that point, I knew I was crying. I was just sobbing. And I said, I don't know. Can I go home, please? I don't want to do any of this anymore. And he said, it's a little late for that. But If you want, you can walk right out that door. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I didn't say this, but I was thinking this. But the only thing I could think to say was, can you tell me what's wrong with me? And he said, I don't know. And then this was the moment where it fully shifted into, you are having a nightmare. Because then all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, or I don't even remember how many it was, people came out from all the doors and they were carrying cameras and they had a big, light on me, and people with a boom mic, and I felt like I was going crazy, literally. Because at this point, I fully was believing that I was having a psychotic break. Because this was exactly the kind of stuff that I was always worried about happening. Always. Whenever I would go into a situation, I would be imagining that this is all a very carefully orchestrated situation to prove what a freak you are to everybody. This situation has been very carefully engineered by everybody involved to humiliate you, specifically. And as soon as you finish this conversation with your boss, as soon as you finish this conversation with your friend, as soon as you finish this conversation with this cashier, as soon as you finish this conversation with anybody, all of a sudden everybody's going to come out with a camera and a boom mic and a light and say, you're a fucking loser show. You're a fucking freak. So then I just ran out the door. And I started pulling my keys out to get in my car. All of a sudden, wham! I get tackled to the ground, and it hurts so bad. I get tackled to the ground, a guy's kneeling on the back of my fucking back, on my spine, and everybody's screaming. There's even more lights on the camera. People are following me out. Everybody's everywhere. And I don't remember exactly what I was saying, but I was like, what did I do wrong? People were asking me all sorts of questions at the police station, in the room where they keep you in. And I was saying, this is not, you don't understand. This is not, I didn't do any of this on purpose. I thought it was a cat. I thought I was adopting a cat. I don't even know what I thought. And then when I was saying that, it was like, maybe I didn't think that there was a cat. I don't know anymore. It's like you just go on autopilot your entire life. You just are like, just as soon as you let your guard down, you just go with the flow, and then all of a sudden you realize you don't know how long you've been moving through your life as just a corpse. You can't even remember the last time where you acknowledged that you were the one in your body, looking through your eyeballs. Because for as long as you could remember, you were looking at everything that was happening to you from 5-10 feet in the air, obliviously. And that, they kept asking me all these questions about the situation, all these things that I thought, like, what were you thinking when you did this? What were you doing when you did this? And I would say, I genuinely don't know. Can you tell me? Can you tell me? What was I thinking? What was going on in the situation? Anyway, the district attorney, they dropped the case. They didn't end up prosecuting it because of something to do with, the fact that it was for a reality show, and that is some court thing. I don't know. Legally, it's like something of constitutional. So I don't know. But they dropped the case, and nothing happened. But I don't want a cat anymore. I don't want anything anymore. And I hope I never do.